What happened in the Westworld Season 2 finale, The Passenger? How did the timelines finally join together, and how does it set things up for Season 3? Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to Deep Geek. This video is brought to you with the support of Amino, a free-to-download app that provides a home for thousands of communities, including Westworld. The Westworld Amino is the best place I've found for in-depth theories, incredible Westworld fan art, quizzes, and a whole lot more. If you love Westworld as much as I do, then the Westworld Amino is the perfect community for you. And to celebrate the end of Westworld Season 2, I am doing a giveaway on Amino of this amazing piece of Westworld art by Vanessa Cole. I like it so much I have a copy of it on my wall. You can see it behind me on live streams. All you need to do to win it is download the Amino app. There's a link in the description to this video. Join the Westworld community, join the Deep Geek chat room, and leave a comment there saying what your favourite moment of the season has been. I'll pick my favourite and announce the winner at the end of the week. Good luck. This was a mind-blowing finale. Never going quite how we expected, answering all of the big questions Season 2 posed us, but also leaving a lot for Season 3 to unpack. So, what was going on? Let's start with Dolores. After the loss of Teddy, she heads to the Valley Beyond in a temporary partnership with the Man in Black, although he turns on her, comes off worse from that encounter, and she ends up going in with Bernard. Once inside the facility, they upload themselves into the Forge, and just to remind ourselves, that's a massive virtual reality world filled with backups of not only hosts, but every human guest mind that they've mapped over the years. Because it is largely built around Delos's first host-human hybrid experiment, James Delos himself, there is a lot of him in there, including a virtual version of Logan, his son, who is the sort of curator of the place. We learn that humans are deceptively simple to decode, always returning to the same points in their lives and making the same mistakes. This is quite a fundamental philosophical point being made here. We are not as complex as we think, so you can literally, or figuratively, as this is a virtual world, read a human like a book, which Dolores does. But we discover that Bernard has been there before, quite a few times, and he planned ahead, setting up a way for the hosts to escape into a virtual Eden. He wants the hosts to be able to go there now Westworld and Delos are collapsing in on themselves, but for Dolores it's the real world or bust. For her, a digital world, however idyllic, is still a gilded cage. Their rival approaches, about which we will see a lot more in Season 3, I'm sure, means three things happen. The door to the virtual Eden is opened, but only for a short time, about which more in a moment. The waters around the facility are released, flooding the place, and Bernard eventually kills Dolores to stop her from killing all the hosts in the virtual Eden, and probably many more people beside. Bernard staggers out, leaving Dolores' body there, to be greeted by the waters rising up through the ground and Delos killing any surviving hosts. A bit before this, Maeve staged her escape from the Mesa hub. Ford had reactivated her core protocol, so it was actually quite an easy job for her to get the hosts, including the Bull hosts lying around in the Mesa, to help her break out. She met up with her gang, who were looking for her, and they all set off for the Valley Beyond. At which point we should give an honourable mention to Lee, who seems to have come completely over to her side by this time, and sacrificed himself to help them escape, while giving one of the speeches he had written for Hector. This was quite heroic, but it's probably best not to think too long about whether his approach of walking unarmoured towards some trigger-happy security forces was the most sensible way to buy some time. Anyway, Maeve and co make it to the Valley Beyond in time for the Tear in the Sky to appear, offering a route to the virtual Eden, and to meet Akecheta and the Ghost Nation, who are escorting hundreds of hosts, including Maeve's daughter. Poor Clementine then leads Delos's attack, making the hosts turn on one another and killing each other. These are the hosts who we will see floating in the flooded valley later. They died in this combat. These and the hosts who made it through the tear into the virtual Eden. Because although their minds and consciousnesses went into the virtual Eden, their bodies stayed there, just dropping off the end of the ramp. If you remember, roughly a third of the bodies that were found had completely clean control units, which puzzled the Delos techies, but now we know why. It's because their minds went to the virtual Eden. But the upshot of all of this is that Maeve got her daughter to safety, saying a tearful farewell, and that Akecheta got to lead his people to the promised land. So both of their emotional journeys this season reached positive endings. At least until Maeve, Hector and Armistice were killed. Although, that said, I suspect that Maeve isn't actually properly dead, nor Hector and Armistice. Maeve's control unit was not damaged, so she is still in there, and at the very end we saw Felix and Sylvester tasked with salvaging any bodies they can, so they'll probably focus on them. In other words, we can expect to see Team Maeve back in action next season. And what about the people who made it to the virtual Eden? Well, there are quite a few of them, including Akecheta, Maeve's daughter, and Teddy, who Dolores uploaded into it later. She then beamed it off into a safe place. We don't know exactly where this is, but Dolores obviously knows where it is, and at least Teddy will probably want to get back to her. So this isn't a closed story just yet, but it does seem to be happiness for these characters in the short term at least. So, after all that, we have everything set up to lead us into the 2 weeks later timeline. The valley is flooding, the host bodies are in place, Akecheta has led his people to safety, well, most of them, and had his reunion with his wife. And Maeve has kept her daughter safe and is now out of the action until next season. But then everything changes. We discover what has been going on with Bernard all season. Elsie seems to team up with Charlotte and Delos again after Bernard abandoned her last episode. This is probably the betrayal Forge told Bernard she would do, and then they all head back to the Mesa Hub, where Bernard sees Charlotte shoot Elsie. This is a harsh way for Elsie to go, but actually quite a testament to her character. Charlotte only killed her because she knew that Elsie wouldn't just fall into line with Delos. She killed her because she was a good person. But the bigger point is the impact this has on Bernard. He realizes that he still has a chance to put things right and allow hosts to escape out into the real world. He realizes that he is now the last host standing, the last hope for hosts to survive in the real world. He calls Ford back after he'd deleted him last episode, but we need to pause here because although Bernard called for Ford and we saw Ford here, he wasn't there. Not this time. It was just Bernard's mind conjuring him up, and Bernard realizes this later. Ford had been there previously, in the cradle and then in Bernard's mind, but this time Bernard was imagining Ford's voice advising him on what to do, when it really was his own voice. This is deliberately echoing what happened at the end of Season 1, when Ford coaches Dolores to realize that it wasn't Arnold's voice that she could hear in her head, it was her own. If there was ever any doubt about Bernard's true sentience, then this is proof that he now is completely self-aware. And Ford, well, he just disappears, because he wasn't there in the first place. When Bernard deleted him from his mind, he does seem to have deleted him. Is this the last we'll see of him? Well, this episode seems thematically to have moved beyond the idea of the creator gods having an active role. Dolores once again emphasized that Bernard is not an exact copy of Arnold, and Ford has now been deleted. And next season promises to be a lot more about hosts surviving on their own, without a deity overseeing them. But that said, we can't say with 100% certainty that there will be no more Ford, because he could have downloaded himself anywhere, at any time. If we've learned one thing about Ford over the last 2 seasons, it's that he always seems to be one step ahead of everyone else. But back to what Bernard decided to do. He had a short period of time before the main Delos force arrived, and used that to make a host copy of Charlotte Hale's body and put Dolores into it. Dolores, in her new body, killed the real Charlotte, and then waited for the Delos security team to arrive, before running through all the events we saw in the 2 weeks later timeline. We'll come back to what she did after that in a moment, because the other thing that happened was Bernard scrambling his own memories to make sure no one discovered that Dolores is in Charlotte, or indeed any of the other secrets he was carrying. This explains the bizarre mental state of Bernard in the 2 weeks later timeline, from when he woke up on the beach. He genuinely didn't remember what had happened, and was getting his memories muddled up, even short-term memories, hence him seeing things twice, for instance. Not that we need to worry about this confused Bernard too much, because Dolores killed him soon enough. So to be clear, all the times we saw Charlotte earlier than this in the timeline, all of Season 1, then in Season 2 when she was hiding in the barn after the massacre in Episode 1, when she went to get Abernathy from the fort, bolting him into the chair, changing Clementine's coding and so on, all this was the real Charlotte Hale. The few times we saw her afterwards, with Strand finding the Bernard clones and cross-questioning Bernard, were Dolores pretending to be Charlotte, which explains her slightly odd behaviour. So she has been biding her time a bit, waiting for the right moment to kill Strand and his henchmen. Out of sight in the forge facility was a good place to keep their bodies hidden for a while, and for the evacuation of the last guests to take place, so she could hitch a lift to the mainland. And the last obstacle to that was Stubbs on the beach. He figured out that she was a host, probably partly because she had a gun in her bag, and partly because she wasn't immediately horrible to him, like Charlotte Hale has been, but he didn't stop her. He let her go. It turns out that he was one of Ford's hires, not a Delos acolyte. He was there to protect the hosts as much as the guests, and the way that Delos employees had been treating him recently won't have made him very sympathetic to the company. His character arc this season has been subtle, but it's there nonetheless, culminating in this small but hugely significant intervention, which ultimately allowed the hosts to continue as a species. All of which brings us to one final piece of preparation that Ford did for the host's big escape. He set up Arnold's house, that we saw being built over 3 decades ago, way back in Episode 2, as a base for the hosts on the mainland, complete with host-making kit. Dolores makes her way there and starts to work. Importantly, she escaped to the mainland with a handful of the pearls, the host control units that can house so much data. Remember how much data Abernathy had in his head, for example. We don't know exactly what all of that data she has is, but we do know that it's a lot, and it seems to allow her to recreate hosts like Bernard. And before we get onto the setup for Season 3, we should pause here to remember the poignancy of this location. When Arnold was alive, he brought Dolores here. She loved it so much that she made him promise he would bring her back here one day. Now, decades later, she has returned. And as Dolores herself made Bernard in Arnold's image, and then Bernard devised the way for her to get here, we are, in a way, seeing the fulfillment of that promise. Arnold brought her back here. But, to return to the action, Dolores off-screen makes her own body once more, and makes a new Bernard one. We're left to guess who is in the Charlotte Hale body. The conversation between Bernard and Dolores here is very much laying the ground for Season 3. Dolores is clearly intent on conquering the world by destroying humanity. Bernard is more inclined to a more cooperative approach, with less death and destruction. Dolores rather enigmatically says that although this difference means that they might both die, the hosts need both of them in the new world. And, one after the other, they both go out into this world. And the man in black? Well, the post-credits sequence was one of the most choose-your-own-interpretation scenes that Westworld has ever done. We see him enter the forge at ground level and then emerge underground, but seemingly many years later. The facility still seems to be there, but dusty and dried out, and he is greeted by Emily, his daughter that he killed, who seems to suggest that the Forge is long gone, and that he is being tested for fidelity, which is what you do when creating host-human hybrids. As I said, this is all left very open to interpretation, deliberately so by the showrunners, but my best guess is that there is some sleight of hand going on here. The man in black we saw lying badly wounded on the beach is probably not the same one with Emily. He still has the same bloodied clothes from his confrontation with Dolores, but the Forge facility is very different, and Emily calls him William, not Dad. This is probably a completely new timeline we will see laid out in Season 3. So, at the end of this season, we are left with Dolores and Bernard in the outside world, Maeve, Hector, Armistice, and probably Clementine as well, all down but probably not out in Westworld, Teddy, Akecheta, and Maeve's daughter in the virtual Eden, Team Delos largely dead, albeit with the company still very alive, and the man in black apparently alive in the current timeline, but possibly becoming a host-human hybrid in another. Season 3 is a long way away, but all of the pieces have been put into place for another season of this ridiculously well-written, acted and produced show. I can't wait. If you've enjoyed my Westworld content, you may also like my Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire videos and live streams. Please do check them out on my channel page. As I said, please do also check out my Patreon page if you're interested in supporting me make more videos like this, or if you want to access some exclusive audio content. Thanks for watching. That's all for this time. I'll see you again soon.